And we're back with the 2019 Darkness to Light Films newsletter for August. And this time I'm going to talk about strolling down memory lane in the film industry. My journey didn't start with me taking classes, going to school, and having that on my first thought. My first thought was stage and production and singing and music. But I was walked into the film industry via my situation, which you can read about in my book, Annihilator of Innocence, or look for our movie called The Prayer, where I talk about things I endured in my life. And while I was a hostage, my perpetrator and I were seen walking downtown at Atlanta, and someone walked up to me and asked me, did I want to be an extra in a movie? And that movie was called Kids Like These with Tyne Daly. And that was how I got into the industry. I was an extra along with my perpetrator on Kids Like These with Tyne Daly. After that, I made some choices to get myself out of that situation. I ended up in the hospital. I got out of the hospital. I called a casting director I had a business card, and I called and she says, hey, I remember you from that movie with Tyne Daly. I would like for you to help me cast ethnic talent. And that's how I got started. I said, okay. Little did I know how to get around town. People started coming to my house to drive with me to the sets, and I would go to the payphone, which was my call center in the projects where I lived. I was kind of poor, if you haven't figured that out. And I would take 5 quarters and call 5 people and tell 5 people to call 5 people. And sometimes I would stay at the payphone till 2 in the morning getting my people cast for the movies that I got calls to cast on. So people in my neighborhood would say, hey lady, you got a phone call. They want you to cast one of those movies. And I would start walking the street and casting people right from the street for the movies that we had to cast for. And I started out doing In the Heat of the Night with Dee Boyd as assistant casting directors for extras casting. And I did that for several years, and many other projects under our belt during those time periods, starting in the late 80s from 1989 on. I worked with Dee Boyd. So I just want to say to people that my journey is not typical, but there's no reason why, if you have an interest in this business, that you can't do it. It was the business that saved me. It was the business that kept me involved while we were going to trial against our perpetrator. For the 2 years in trial, I was able to go cast, get people signed in on the set, go to court, and come back, sign people out off the set, pay people at the end of the day, and do it all over again. But at the time, I didn't realize how hard I was really working, because it was that something different than what I was dealing with in my everyday life, trying to raise my kids, dealing with court, dealing with trial, dealing with the perpetrator, and dealing with casting people on sets. So I got to walk along imaginary worlds, see imaginary things, go home to real life, and wake up to face the imaginary world again the next day. So thank you for supporting us for our newsletter. Look forward for our next subject that I'll be talking about. I will be talking about preparing for film festivals, but I will do that in my blog. Thanks for joining me. This is Tahiera Brown.